So it's a very warm welcome to you all, and thanks so much for joining us today. Today's webinar is on the Asian Development Bank's Asian Development Outlook Update, which is focused on transforming agriculture in Asia. I'm Bruce Frayne, and the moderator today. I'm at the University of Waterloo. I'm a professor in the Faculty of Environment. So today's event is co-hosted by the University of Waterloo, and specifically the Faculty of Environment, and the Asian Development Bank's North America Representative Office and the V2V Global Partnership, which is a project. While reviewing this report on transforming agriculture in Asia, it reminded me of the fact that so many farmers are still small-scale producers, and that many more have lost their access to land and therefore their livelihoods. So this really led me to reflect on how Indigenous peoples around the world and here in Canada have been displaced, and in many cases have lost access to their traditional lands and livelihoods. Given that this event today is hosted by the University of Waterloo, I think it's appropriate for us to acknowledge that our institution is located on the traditional territory of the neutral Anishinaabe and Haudenosaunee peoples. Our main campus is situated on the Helderman Tract, the land granted to the Six Nations that includes 6 miles on each side of the Grand River. And while this acknowledgement is context specific to Waterloo, I ask us to be mindful of the many peoples affected by the processes of development, including the transformation of the agricultural sector, which is what we are here to discuss today. So for today's event, our Faculty of Environment's Dean, Jean Andrea, will first provide introductory remarks. And then the ADB Principal Economist, Takashi Yamano, will provide a presentation on the Asian Development Outlook 2021 Update Theme Chapter, Transforming Agriculture in Asia. Following the presentation, we will have a discussion featuring comments from 2 of our faculty members at the University of Waterloo and 1 from Wilfrid Laurier University, which for those of you who don't know is in the same town, so we're just next door to each other. And time permitting, at the end of those comments, we will open the floor for Q&A from the participants. In order to help with that Q&A session, please feel free to submit questions via the Zoom Q&A function. So submit those and we'll be able to pick those up during the Q&A. All right, so to kick things off, let me first introduce Dean Jean Andrea for her introductory remarks. Professor Andrea has served as Dean of the University of Waterloo's Faculty of Environment since 2014 and has been a member of the faculty since 1989. So if you want to do the arithmetic, that's a long institutional memory. She was recently reappointed to a 2-year term through June 2022. Professor Andrea's research is concerned with the implications of climate change for transportation infrastructure and operations. So Jean, I would like to open the floor to you at this point. Thank you.
Thank you, Bruce, for those actually really good reflective comments to get us started in a good way today. As a representative of the university, I'm really thrilled to welcome you all here today to discuss transforming agriculture in Asia. As a university, we're grateful to be able to participate in this event as part of our commitment to sustainability. As many of you are grappling with sustainability, we too are in our curriculum and our research programs and our involvement with external agencies as advocates of change. As the world grapples with achieving the United Nations Agenda 2030 and its associated 17 Sustainable Development Goals, nothing is more important, I think, than SDG 2, ending hunger, achieving food security, and improving nutrition and promoting sustainable agriculture. And this, of course, is what we're here to learn about today. And so I just want to say that I wish you an interesting and an empowering webinar. And thank you again for being at the table with us as we learn together. And so I'll turn things back to Bruce again, who will introduce the speaker and the panelists.
Thank you very much, Jean. I appreciate those words, and I'm sure we are going to have a productive session. I'd like now to introduce Takashi Yamano, who is the Principal Economist in the Economic Analysis and Operations Support Division of the Asian Development Bank's he has got rid of my screen for me by sharing. What I can tell you is that he is partly responsible, in fact, the lead for preparing this report. Prior to joining the ADB, Takashi worked as an impact assessment specialist at the International Rice Institute from 2011 to 2017. He's also taught postgraduate courses at the National Graduate Institute for Policy Studies in Tokyo from 2002 to 2011, and previously worked as a consultant at the World Bank. So that's a strong pedigree, and we're very honored to have him join us today and to take us through a presentation on the report. So please go ahead, Takashi.
Okay, Bruce, thank you very much for kind introduction, and Professor Andrea, thank you for the opening remarks. The faculty of University of Waterloo, thank you for hosting this webinar for us. So I'm very happy to share our thematic chapter in Asian Development Outlook 2021 update. Asian Development Outlook is ADB's flagship report. We publish this twice a year, and this is the second one in 2021. The title is Transforming Agriculture in Asia. This is the first time for this report, ADO, to carry thematic chapter on agriculture. So we are very excited about this. Please go to the next slide. So the outline of the report, first we talk about the challenges on the agriculture in Asia. We divide it into three: food demand challenges, and demographic challenges, and changing and fragile environment. I will present one by one. Then we will talk about sort of solutions from the innovation to boost productivity and ensure sustainability. And then the last three, we'll talk about support system. This is outside of agriculture production system, but supporting farmers, as mentioned by Bruce and Professor Audrey. So these farmers in Asia are small farmers, and so they, how to support them. So that would be our last section. Please go to the next slide. Thank you. Yeah, so this is the first of the challenge part. Please go to the next slide. So first challenge we talk about is changing demand. As you know, Asian economies are growing fast, and then Asia has a large population. So their demand on agriculture are changing dramatically. And that change has big implications on the agriculture in the region and also outside the region. What we show here on the screen is the total calorie consumption per person and over time. As you can see, Japan, Republic of Korea, they increase their total consumption, and over time, as their income increases, they hit a sort of plateau around 3,000 kilocalorie per day per person. And you can see PRC, China, is catching up, and also they are hitting the plateau level. And other countries, Asian countries, are increasing their total consumption. We wanted to show this graph showing to indicate that their consumption is increasing, but soon we think their total calorie consumption will hit the plateau. Okay, so many Asian countries are reaching that level. Please go to the next slide. But what's important is not the total calorie, but what people eat. So we picked animal meat consumption and seafood consumption. So these are two important sources of animal protein. And as you can see on the left-hand side, animal meat consumption has been increasing, but the Asian countries level is still below the advanced economy outside of Asia. That was the time of 1972, but the other countries, the consumption level is higher than that level. So many Asian countries are catching up. What's interesting and makes the Asian consumption different from other countries is the seafood consumption. So the Asian consumers consume a lot more seafood than outside of Asia. And so you can see that many Asian countries are increasing seafood consumption. Next, please. But what's important for this animal protein, animal-based consumption is that, as you know, the production of animal products consumes a lot of resources. Here, it shows that how much resources needed to produce million kilocalories for the human consumption. Different products, the wheat, rice, and so on. So left-hand side and plant-based, right-hand side is animal-based, pork, eggs, fish, and then on the right-hand side end is beef. So to produce million kilocalories on these products, there's a lot of cropland is needed, which is green. Water is needed, which is blue. And then these production emit greenhouse gases. And so the beef is the largest emitter of greenhouse gas, and followed by dairy and other products. So, not only animal products, what's important for Asian consumer is the rice. Rice consumption, production emits a lot of, in this case, rice case, it's ethane gas from their rice field. But, combined with the figures I show in the previous slide, as consumers shift their consumption from plants products to animal-based products, we will need a lot more resources. That raises concerns. So on the small part, on the fish, I will come back to this point later. Okay, the next slide. So that was the first challenge that comes from changing demand for food. Next challenge comes from demography. This graph shows that the total population, which is on that gray, it's increasing. So, it's about, in Asia, this is the total population in Asia, about 4 billion in Asia right now. And then this is expected to increase to 4.5 billion by 2050. The green shows that share of rural population. As you can see on the right-hand side, that's the share percentage. Rural population share was about 80% in 1970. It has been declining. It's now about 50%, but it is expected to decline below 40% by 2050. But this is the total of Asia. However, if we look at more by the region, East Asia, like People's Republic of China, this ratio is dramatically decreasing. And other advanced Asian economies, this portion of rural population is dramatically declining. So this has two implications. One is that not only the total number of workers in rural areas is declining, but many young people are leaving, young men are leaving. So that means that the farmers are getting old, and then women are left behind in the rural area. Please go to the next slide. So right-hand side shows the distribution, age distribution. This is only one time in recent years, the data, whatever year that the data available for us. And you can see that Republic of Korea, 80 years old and above is more than 60, close to 70% of the farmers. And in other Asian countries, Thailand, Indonesia, Philippines, the age farmers above 40 and above 50, they are becoming majority of the farmers. And then this is only one time, but I can assure you this, the proportion of aged elderly, I shouldn't say elderly, I'm over 50, but those people, 40 years old and above, this proportion is increasing. And if we look at the right-hand side, this shows that the proportion of women in agriculture, and you can see that the many countries have more than 50% of workers are women. And in the 3 countries which we used yellow, Bangladesh, Cambodia, Nepal, has increased their proportions from 2010, that's the bottom, to 2019, that's on the vertical line. But this is based on the survey. But the large survey like this labor survey tend to overlook the woman's contribution and then actual hours work in agriculture. So we cover in the reports lots of field surveys, and the field survey tend to highlight that the women devote more time than this this graph shows. Okay. Please go to the next slide. So the third challenge for the Asian economy and also other region is the climate change. As you can see that on the left-hand side, in the past 50 years, there has been a change in temperature, and then increase of temperature is dark red, and then also the orange part, that's the where that the temperature has increased, not temperature, sorry, temperature increased, but also this shows the precipitation. So the precipitation has declined on the dark red and then orange. And so these areas are becoming drier, and you can see that Myanmar is in that dark red, and also Afghanistan and that area, northern India and that area. So I don't think it is coincidence that these areas are the area where that economy and society is unstable. So this might have contributed of the drier drier conditions. So this climate change may have increased extreme weather events and then causes environmental losses and so on. So I will come back to this later. Okay, please go to the next slide. And lastly, this is related to water. So that because of the drier area, in some areas, the drought is becoming a problem, and also many areas, water shortage, stress is becoming a problem, including depletion of underground water. So if we look at the area where that water stress is affecting, you can see on the left bar that outside of Asia has a larger share, notably the sub-Saharan Africa. However, if we think about population who are affected because of highly populated area in Asia along the river basins, so in terms of the affected people, the Asia countries have a large number of people affected by the water shortage. But at the same time, in Asia, many areas are irrigated for the agriculture production. So there is a chance by using irrigation systems more effectively, we can address this issue of water stress. In the report, we discuss how to address that, but due to limited time, I cannot spend too much time, but there is the problems and then possible solutions. Okay, please go to the next slide. Against these challenges, we can talk about innovation to boost the productivity, and also regulations to ensure sustainability, and more comprehensive support systems. Next slide, please. And the next, please. One way of solving problem, and this is just a summary. Asia has 350 million people, smallholder farmers, and then they are the majority of the farmers. Okay, please go to the next slide. One way of helping them is using machine mechanization, and this graph shows that the size of the bubble represent the use of agriculture machineries. So you can see that on the horizontal line, going from left to right means that increasing labor productivity. And then from the vertical sign, right, that's the land productivity. As you can see, many relatively advanced Asian countries, they have increased labor productivity from left to right by adopting agriculture machines. So this does not mean that smallholder farmers need to abandon agriculture and then let large farmers come in and use machine. No, that's not what we are talking about. Helping small farmers use access to machines. That's the more realistic way. And we discuss in the report how that the renting machines or service providers coming in and helping smallholders, this service is expanding in Asia. And many farmers now, smallholder farmers are also gathering together, consolidating not land, but activities so that it is easier for the machines to be employed. We think that's a solution to increase productivity. Please go to the next slide. And then here is the organic agriculture. Let me skip this. I know. So I want to spend more time on this. This is aquaculture production. Well, this is a total capture of fish and fishery products. You can see in this graph at the bottom, blue, light blue and blue, dark blue, this represent capture, the million tons of fish capture in open sea, open water. The dark green and light green, this represent the total production from aquaculture production. As you can see that the capture from open sea, open water is almost flat, but the dark green is increasing. So since late 1980s, the increase of human consumption of fish and fishery products actually was covered by the expansion of aquaculture. And next slide, please. And actually the 90% of the aquaculture production comes from Asia. So Asia dominates this aquaculture production. PRC is the largest aquaculture production. And you can see that from 1970s, 90s, and then 2000, this last decade, they have expanded production of aquaculture. And then PRC is followed by Indonesia, India, and Vietnam. Okay, please go to the next slide. So that is aquaculture trying to provide fish products to the consumers. So these are what's happening on the farmland and also aquaculture. Now, majority of large portion of aquaculture is taking place on the farmland and using the pond. So that's happening in the agriculture production. Now I want to shift to outside of agriculture production. Next, please. So as I mentioned, the climate change and extreme weathers causing concerns and causing damage. One way to mitigate the damage is using early warning systems. And many countries are adopting early warning systems, and early warning systems becomes more effective if they are combined with supporting investment. For example, investing in the shelters, investing in the storage rooms, and so on. So another way is to help predict such damage is using the advanced spatial information systems. And this is one example how now we can use the satellite image and other images technologies to identify where the damage is happening. So this shows Myanmar, and then green is very good crop conditions, but the red one, we don't see much, but the red one is the severe droughts and then other impacts. So this is one way. So this advanced information technology is helping. Next, please. Advanced information systems is also helping, not before, that was early warning. So that's before the damage, but after the damage, and inevitably some farmers suffer from damage. And this is again, the same technology. Now it's used by crop insurance programs. And this is the actual map of one state, Madhya Pradesh states in India, which is used by insurance programs, by the insurance companies to verify claims by the farmers. And in this case, in the white circle, you can see the red. So that shows that the severe stress on the crops. So the insurance companies, when they receive claim from the farmers in this area, they are likely to accept that claim. Of course, they will conduct other verifications. But this type of technology speed up the process of crop insurance. Okay, next, please. Finally, the digital technologies are spreading and helping farmers, producers, traders, consumers in different ways. And the left panel, the left picture shows that aquaculture producers taking picture of shrimp and then sending the picture to the expert or this app developer to judge the quality. Probably AI is involved, the quality of the fish, and if there is any disease of the fish. And so that's, and also this is the example of shrimp farmers, but I know many other agriculture producers use like Facebook or other social media to form a group, and they exchange production and other information to help each other. Sometimes the expert comes in and provide, weed out the inappropriate information. Lastly, the right-hand side, as we depend on, especially under the lockdown in Philippines, I depended on that delivery of goods. So this is helping also connecting the producers with the consumers. Okay, next, please. So at the end, the policy recommendations to Asian countries. So first of all, as I mentioned about the benefits of expansion of aquaculture, but expansion of aquaculture has raised concerns of its impact on the environment, the polluted water, polluted soils, and also chemical residuals in the products. So these has been identified and it has been addressed by both producers and consumers, but this needs to, the regulations needs to be expanded, and then the monitoring needs to be strengthened. Access to machines, as I said, it doesn't make sense for smallholder farmers to buy machines, but helping them to access the machinery is useful. And improved technologies can help make the agriculture and aquaculture sustainable. On the comprehensive, the other systems, we find that early warning systems and crop insurance, these can be useful, and advanced information technologies can help them. And finally, the agriculture policies, many of the agriculture regulations laws are very old, and some of them needs to update to not only supporting productions that tend to distort the market, but also supporting the more market-oriented innovation encouraging policies would be more productive. Okay, I think this is it. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Takashi. That was great. Very interesting and a great summary of the report. Really appreciate that. What we are going to do now is hold off on questions until the end of the session. So we still have our three panelists who are going to comment. And what I'm going to do is introduce each of them now, and then I will hand over to them in the order that I introduced them. So to begin, we will meet Jennifer Clapp, who is a Canada Research Chair in Global Food Security and Sustainability and Professor in the School of Environment, Resources and Sustainability at the University of Waterloo. The second person who will be speaking is Andrea Collins, who is an Assistant Professor in the School of Environment, Resources and Sustainability. also at the University of Waterloo. And Andrea's research focuses on the role of gender in the governance of food, land, and agriculture, both locally and globally. And the third panelist is Zhenzhong Si. And Zhenzhong Si is the project manager of the My Food project, which is part of something called the Hungry City Partnership at the Wilfrid Laurier University. Zhenzhong's research examines food security and food system sustainability with a particular focus on urban food systems, alternative food initiatives, and ecological agriculture in China. And I should just say that Zhenzhong might be at Wilfrid Laurier, our university down the road, but he is a product of the Faculty of Environment and the University of Waterloo. So that's where he, in fact, got his PhD. All right, so thanks to our three panelists for agreeing to bring your reflections and thoughts to the webinar today. And so I think what I'll do is start off by inviting Jennifer to share her thoughts for the next few minutes. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Bruce, for that introduction, and thanks, Takashi, for your excellent presentation. And I just want to also say thanks for inviting me to be part of this panel. I really appreciated the opportunity to read the theme chapter on transforming agriculture in Asia as part of the latest Asian Development Outlook report. And it's very timely for us to be speaking about these issues because it's just a week or so past the UN Food System Summit, which grappled with a lot of the key themes that were identified in the report. So in my brief comments, I just want to raise a couple of points about some of the content of the chapter and maybe raise a few questions for Takashi. I don't know if we have time to get into that discussion, but I'll raise them nonetheless. So first, what really struck me about in reading the chapter is that while it focuses on the three key trends, and Takashi outlined these, the shifts in consumer demand, demographic change, and fragile natural environment, what seemed to me as a big meta theme behind all of these trends is actually inequality. And in other words, inequality is, I would say, is deeply entwined with each of these trends. So for example, although the report notes the important gains made on account of the Green Revolution technologies and mechanization that were adopted in the 1960s and 70s, which the report starts out with, in fact, and says this was really important for improving nutrition and productivity. The report also notes, though, that this process or rather that we still are facing huge challenges. And the literature, if we look at the literature on the Green Revolution, it indicates that this process is now widely understood to have contributed to some of these inequalities. So it raises this question of the interaction of the Green Revolution with inequality more broadly. And it's also been associated with the rural-urban divide as well as environmental problems caused by mechanization and chemical use. And some of these issues are raised in the report, but it struck me that these inequalities that came out of the Green Revolution might be contributing to some of the problems that the region is facing today. And similarly, the rural-urban wealth divide, also sort of instigated by the Green Revolution, is contributing as well to these deeply unequal dietary shifts that the report talks about. So the sort of the presence at the same time of both overnutrition and undernutrition, and that seems to also be connected to this rural-urban division that we can again connect to inequalities spurred by the Green Revolution. So I just wanted to highlight how these inequalities sort of are underlying and connected in complex ways with the challenges that the region is facing today. And I wondered if Takashi could say a bit more about the drivers of those inequalities, because that was one aspect that I wanted to see more, in reading. I was like, okay, so, maybe connecting the dots back to the Green Revolution as part of the inequalities, but there could be other reasons for those inequalities. So for example, the concentration of corporate power in the food system could be another driver. So I just wanted to hear a bit more about the drivers of those inequalities in sort of identifying those trends. And the second point, just briefly, I wanted to raise is also with respect to the solutions that were presented in the report. So as Takashi outlined and as the report stresses, there are huge challenges remaining with respect to malnutrition and hunger on the part of some rural populations, as well as low agricultural productivity that remain despite the Green Revolution. Yet at the same time, the report, it does put forward a number of potential solutions, but one of them is to focus on more application of high-tech farming solutions. So, for example, as was mentioned, digital technologies, satellite imagery, blockchain, artificial intelligence, and further mechanization. And while it might be that governments adopting the Green Revolution didn't fully anticipate the social and environmental problems associated with it when they adopted those strategies in the 60s and 70s, we do have today in the scholarly literature a growing body of research that examines the risks associated with this kind of high-tech solution, especially around digital technology. So for example, we know they use more energy, especially blockchain and digitally connected machinery, for example. They raise questions about access to data and control of that data, especially when we're talking about how the fact that large concentrated corporations tend to dominate that sector. And they can also contribute to further inequalities because not all farmers can access these technologies equally. So I just wanted to sort of raise these point about some of the risks associated with that particular set of solutions identified in the report, and wondered if Takashi did say a little bit about how mechanization can be used avoiding the risk of further land consolidation, but maybe he could say a little bit more about how these high-tech solutions might be able to be utilized in ways that avert the worst potential side effects that they could cause. Anyway, I will stop there and say thank you.
All right, thanks very much, Jennifer. Insightful and some challenging questions, let's put it that way. And I'm sure Takashi has taken note. We'll move on now to Andrea Collins. So I'll open the floor to you now, please.
Great, thank you. And yeah, I just want to echo what Jennifer said in terms of the invitation to participate and to get to read this report and be here for the presentation and to respond to it. So thank you very much, Takashi, for the report and the presentation. And yeah, similarly, I'm going to pick up on some of the themes that Jennifer did, but I'm going to, and so in particular, the theme of inequality, and specifically on the role of gender inequality. And I really appreciated that the report, identified the challenge of gender inequality, in particular, the feminization of the agricultural workforce, and how also the aging workforce as two kind of key challenges. And I think that that's, really interesting and again, timely to be thinking about. And I also appreciate that the report notes the data collection challenges there. That part of it is, we know that that workforce is feminizing, but also there's still challenges in terms of actually knowing just how many women are in agriculture. And that's in part because sometimes the agricultural work that women do is still not recognized as agricultural work, that the subsistence labor that's happening alongside kind of the cash crop production doesn't always get recognized, either, depending on who's being interviewed, or even they themselves don't think of it as agricultural labor because it's there to support families or communities. And so I think it serves to kind of further emphasize just how important thinking about gender inequality in agricultural production is, but also that the report also recognizes the broader challenges of discrimination and bias against women in terms of the kinds of gaps that we see. So access to land, access to capital, access to just information and training. Sometimes that goes hand in hand with gaps in education still, that women they still don't have access to that. I would add, I don't know if it's meant to be, well, I'll just say, because I think there's other spin-off effects from those inequalities as well, that women then as a result also tend to be more vulnerable to gender-based violence. And if we add economic and climate stresses onto that as well, that there's other challenges to be thinking about too. So it makes it a very kind of fraught social, political, economic, legal situation for women to be grappling with, as they're also, food providers. The other challenge that I thought was interesting that was outlined here is also the ripple effects for malnutrition, and particularly in children, and the potential long-term effect of that. And that, of course, is also caused by poverty, right? So people just do not have access to food because of other issues of poverty. And so similar to Jennifer, I wanted to kind of connect this to the kind of policy recommendations as a result, because I think that thinking about these challenges, specifically the gender-based challenges, knowing that women are providing so much of this agricultural labor, but also, nutrition support for families. How can policies be designed to respond to those challenges too? And so I appreciate in the report, there is some mention of the role of technology in that could be perhaps specifically with reference to aging populations to make life easier. But there are, concerns about how technology is designed, that those are there's gender inequality in those fields as well. So how do we ensure that the technologies that are being developed are appropriate for the bodies that are being used, but also ecologically and culturally appropriate. And of course, those other challenges of access to inputs, that we know that women have that gap, they have less access to capital and training as it is. So how do we overcome those if they are to make the best use of appropriate technologies? And I think that that's an overarching challenge going forward. And similarly, like some of the other solutions in terms of insurance, women have historically had less access to credit. They're seen as riskier because they don't have collateral. So how does that play into the kinds of solutions that we come up with? And of course, and land, right? Women don't have access to land. I think this is or they have access to land, but they don't necessarily have ownership or control of land. And that becomes a deeper systemic issue in terms of how we overcome it. So again, I think it raises a lot of really interesting challenges of how do we come up with policy that can actually support women, agricultural workers, and their well-being. So thank you very much.
Wonderful, thanks, Andrea. Very insightful. And we do know, of course, that gender equality is one of the SDGs. And there are various analyses out there that indicate that if you just promote gender equality alone, you actually solve so many of the SDG challenges that are out there. So thank you for those comments. I think that really brought that to light. So Zhenzhong, I would like to invite you now to please share your comments with us. Thank you.
Thank you, Bruce, for the invitation, and thank you so much, Takashi, for the presentation and the report. I think the chapter conveys a substantial amount of information about challenges facing the agriculture sector in Asia, and also identifies a set of innovations, I think, promising to address these challenges, although that we still have quite a lot of problems, as Jennifer and Andrea identified. I think while we can't deny the importance of productivity for food security, increasing productivity is no longer an effective approach to reduce poverty in rural areas, especially in the context of China and perhaps other Asian countries where they have a lot of small holders. Given this very small farm size, the revenue from farming is much lower compared to working in factories, no matter how high the productivity is. So this renders reducing poverty through increasing productivity almost irrelevant, I think. So one particular important issue, I think, pertains to food demand side, is food safety and consumer trust due to excessive usage of agrochemicals. For example, in our survey in 2015 in China, over 70% of urban residents concerned about food safety on a daily basis. I think that's an alarming crisis of trust, and the top food safety concerns actually are related to chemical residues in vegetables and growth hormones and antibiotics usage in meat production. So apparently consumers demand food with better quality. So there is a mismatch, I think I want to identify that between the urban side and the rural side. So on the one hand, in the urban side, we have a serious concern of food safety. And on the other hand, we have still a lot of farmers producing low quality food with excessive usage of chemicals, but desperately need to improve their income. And meanwhile, we have the problem of declining, feminizing, and aging rural population as identified in the report. And I think fundamentally, many of these issues are all consequences of the low economic viability of the agriculture sector. So the question is, how do we alleviate rural poverty with that dilemma in mind? So one thing we want to address the food safety concern for urban residents, and on the other hand, we want to address the issue of production of low quality food. I think the report raised an important point about land consolidation and in two ways, including transferring a large amount of small producers' land to agriculture companies. That is one point, and the other point is about organizing smallholders together through farmers' cooperatives. I think these two solutions aim to address the issue of small farm size and allow small farmers to better tap into the neoliberal kind of market-driven food economy that we face right now. But I think another important solution is really improving the quality of food through transitioning towards more sustainable ways of farming. So this better quality food production would allow farmers to address consumers' food safety concerns, while also increase income and mitigate climate change impacts. And we are still in the early stage of that transition in Asia, but a few good things are happening in the past few years. I want to say that China was able to curb the increase of agrochemical usage in 2017 and has been providing all kinds of supports for certified organic and green food production. And a growing number of young people and entrepreneurs have been devoting to agroecology and migrating actually back to the rural areas. But there are still quite a lot of problems and challenges in this transition. For example, the government supports are quite limited and largely exclude smallholders, who are the majority of food producers. And also the cost of organic certification is prohibitive for most farmers. It's very expensive. And farmers' cooperatives are also demand more local champions, I would say, who, these are called capable persons in the Chinese context, who can take the lead and organize local farmers together. There are local leaders, who have wide connections and access to various resources. And again, I think lack of consumer trust is still a major challenge. So I think more research is needed to address, this many challenges and also the diverse interest of multiple stakeholders, including not only farmers, but also government and consumers. I also want to quickly mention that COVID-19, we haven't talked much about that. COVID-19 has impacted the agriculture sector mainly by restructuring the marketing channels of agricultural products. I mean, in the past 2 years, traditional food value chains have been struck the most, while online e-commerce of food grew exponentially. I think the report briefly identified that as well. I think this growth takes various forms and is driven by both large corporations and also new development actors, such as community organizations organizing, online food markets. So we have to ask, what are the implications of this growth of e-commerce for farmers, for these millions of smallholders? Because consumers are rapidly switching from traditional food supply chains, food outlets, to this new online markets. And how will the agriculture sector be able to adapt to these changes? I think is something we need to think about. I'll stop here and hopefully that we can answer some questions regarding these points. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Zhenzhong. Well, as you can all see, Zhenzhong has a lot of thoughts about the subject, and I think we could have gone on for another half an hour quite easily. You raised some really, really amazing points there, just so interesting, particularly on the food safety issue and this, also the transition of population from rural to urban, which Takashi showed us a graph of what that looks like for Asia. So the urban transition is underway, and this also has significant impacts for the agricultural sector, particularly given the feminization issue, the small-scale farming questions that are raised. Okay, so we're now going to open the floor for Q&A. Of course, I think, Takashi, you're sort of in the hot seat a little bit here, but I know that you come well equipped to handle some of these questions.
Yeah.
I think I'd like to just actually start, if we can, with the question of these drivers of inequality, which I think Jennifer raised around the fact that unless we address inequality as a sort of central strategy, we're not really able to deal with this. And I think that's a theme that I've heard both from not just from Jennifer, but from Andrea and Zhenzhong as well, just kind of couched in different ways, but it gets at that question. So I think I'd just like to open the floor to you, perhaps just to reflect a little bit on this issue of inequality and how can we really grow ourselves out of inequality and rural poverty? I mean, what has the experience been?
Okay, so let me address. So this was asked with the Green Revolution, but you know, as Jennifer said, the overall, the underlying concern is inequality, and that is concern in Asia. The many poor people live in rural area, and this goes to the rural-urban divide. But let's go back to inequality and Green Revolution. Before Green Revolution, there was land reform movement. And the land reform was the divide the land from large farmers to the smallholders. And this happened in Japan, Taiwan, Taipei, China, and South Korea. And these three countries were successful, relatively, dividing land into the small pieces and smallholders. Other Asian countries tried to follow, but the land reform did not go well in many countries. That means the land inequality remained. There are many landholders, large landholders and small landholders. Then the productivity increased by Green Revolution. That's enhanced the inequality. And this is sort of the cause of one of the inequality. The Green Revolution and production support from the governments, who benefited most are the large landholders, right? So all the smallholders also benefited from increased productivity, but the large landholders benefited more. And then they support fertilizer substitutions, subsidies, and other subsidies, which price support. These are supporting production, and so the large holders benefited more. So that's one reason why this inequality in rural area has probably expanded due to the production support. So that our report discussed at the end, let's move out from production support, this distort market, but also enhance the inequality. So that move out of the production support, and then that is actually difficult things to do for the policymakers. But this is the one way. And then the other inequality, so we stick with inequality, so that rural-urban divide, as Zhenzhong said, it is difficult to increase farmers' income by just supporting production because that they are small holders. What's happened in rural area is that the farmers started working on the non-farm activities and earning non-farm activities. In rural areas, even in Asia, farming is no longer the biggest income source for many farmers. Many farmers, they earn income from non-farm activities in rural areas, maybe working as a driver, working at the small shops, and so on. So, in addition, they have their family members working in urban area. In many countries in Asia, many members working abroad. So this non-farm income is helping them to move out of poverty. Having said that, the farming income is still important for them to have a basic income level. So that's the role for the agriculture production and income to provide a basic income. But to really get out of poverty, probably the non-farm income is important, and for that is education of children is important for them to move out from that, and that is happening, and that leads to the declining rural population. But that's inevitable part of economic transformation. So and then malnutrition. And the malnutrition is linked with income inequality. The children who still suffer from malnutrition, they are the children of poor household. So inequality is related to malnutrition. And then the report talks about malnutrition. We don't have time to, I didn't have time to present it, but it's it's important issue. And it's not only the lack of food, but the lack of nutrients. And that's the problem. Okay, let me stop. I think there are other items to talk.
That's fantastic. Thank you very much. I think I'm going to move to a couple of questions from our participants. Samdu Chetri is on here, and just to say hi, Samdu, special greeting to you. Nice to meet you again in this rather strange way. And I'm going to actually take the last question that you raised, because I think it connects to what Zhenzhong's been talking about around food safety and the demands for safe food. And Samdu's question is that we do know that sustainable farming can be done through organic farming methods. And we'd just be interested to know what your thoughts are on this. And it doesn't have to be your thoughts necessarily, Takashi, it could be the panel as well. But I'll leave it open for people to jump in and discuss the issue of sustainability in organic farming as a way forward.
We talked about organic farming, and if you can, please put up, there is one slide on organic farming. The problem or challenge for organic farming is certification, as Zandu or the other people have mentioned it. It's extremely time consuming and then resource expensive to have for farmers to have their products certified as organic, and it's very difficult. In Asia, less than 1% of the agricultural land is under the organic farming. Nonetheless, there's a demand, increasing demand for organic products in Asia from the high-income families and so on. So that we need to develop a more cheaper way, but a reliable way of certifying organic products. There is a sort of group who is trying to use the farmer peer pressure, farmer group certifying, guaranteeing, okay, our members' products is organic. So, but not external supervisor or certifiers coming in, because in some cases in Asia they have to bring in qualified certifier from Europe. That's very expensive. So some farmers are trying to create groups to certify themselves and then trying to convince consumers, okay, this is reliable. So this graph on the left-hand side shows that agricultural land devoted to organic farming. So the largest one is the South Asia and East Asia. East Asia is mostly China. And it's increasing and over 6 million hectares. However, that's less than 0.5% of the farming area. So the reason why this is not going up is the certification. I have different studies, checking with the consumers and also the restaurants, and they are saying that the unreliable labeling and the unavailability of organic farming, organic products is the reason why they don't buy it. It's not that they are not interested. So let me stop.
Thanks.
Back to you, Bruce.
Yeah, thank you. Zhenzhong, do you have a comment on this? Because I know you face these issues of certification versus sort of ecological farming and the kind of bigger food safety questions around that. So do you have any comments?
Yeah, thank you. I want to echo with Takashi about the points that sustainable agriculture doesn't necessarily mean organic agriculture. I think in many cases, people tend to think about sustainable agriculture as organic. But organic agriculture has its own problems, I would say, such as marginalizing smallholders, reinforcing the already kind of imbalance of power between big producers and small producers, because only big producers are able to afford those very expensive certification. And also they have their marketing channels to access the modern food supply chain, such as special organic shelves in supermarkets. And organic agriculture also has a problem that it tends to serve the elite group of people, customers, and also it's still a niche market in many cases. So I think there are multiple ways to alternatives to organic farming, such as natural farming. There are also different kinds of agroecological practices going on that aims to reduce the dependence on agrochemicals, and also such as a participatory guarantee system that's been adopted gradually in some Asian countries, in China as well. And I think the more important issue is really about consumer trust, because people, are cautious about buying organic sometimes because they wonder if the organic is really, the real organic products, and people have this concern about certification fraud. So to address the issue of trust, I want to say that there are various kind of innovations. I saw one question from the Q&A from the audience about how we could solve the issue of for farms closely related to urban areas. I think one of the innovations is to develop more alternative food initiatives, such as CSA farms that are producing and also certified through PGS to provide ecologically produced food to consumers in cities. Many of CSA farms are located close to city centers. So yeah, just want to add on at that point.
That's great, thank you. We're going to change direction a little bit and focus on aquaculture. I see that Cesar has a question saying, yeah, fine, aquaculture is developing, but at the same time, it's posing a serious challenge to traditional fisheries and displacing fishers from fishing space. So I know this is it's a big problem, particularly in Asia, and it makes sea spaces more vulnerable. So the question then is, how do we address this? How do we safeguard small fishers and the ecosystem while also promoting aquaculture?
That's a difficult question. Let me come back. Well, if I can, let me come back later. The more problem we discuss in the report is the environmental impact, and then also food related to food safety, as Zhenzhong mentioned about how to improve food security, food safety. In a box story in our report, we talked about how the shrimp producers in Vietnam, they started exporting shrimp to Japan, but the Japanese authorities, they rejected a large number of shrimps because of the residuals, chemical residuals in the shrimps. Over time, so that the traders and also producers, they collaborated, adopted new technologies and so on, and then reduced that chemical residuals in the shrimp. And then so they started exporting shrimp, and then now Vietnam is I believe, largest exporter of shrimp to US. So, that checking system, and then also the reports, we have an interesting story where making the tests of chemicals in shrimp or other fish products free, and Thailand provide that free testing. So that has helped the Thailand and the aquaculture producers to improve reduce that chemical residuals in the product. So, this is the kind of regulations combined with technology and monitoring system can help producers. So this is easy to check in the import-export, but maybe domestically, if the consumer groups or the buyers, and then they start checking, or authority, the governments started checking residuals, that may help. But not only checking, but providing technologies and practices how to reduce it. So that is, and then this link to the digital divide mentioned by Andrea and Jennifer, and digital divide is a problem. But also this reducing digital divide is opportunity. Now many farmers even the rural areas, they have now access to internet, and they now have access to informations. And then that, is also opportunity. And this is also opportunity for women, because that traditional agriculture extension workers are usually men, and they tend to talk to male farmers. But technology is, access to information is gender free, as long as they have access. So, that may be opportunity. So, I may be optimistic, but that can be, as long as women have access to mobile phone and other technology. Okay, let me stop. But fisheries, I don't know the solution. It's very difficult to say that. One problem in aquaculture, as I mentioned, as I forgot to mention it, is the feed stuff. This is a bit ironic. For the production of aquaculture production, they use wasted fish products as a feed stuff to produce aquaculture. So they catch the fish from the open water and then use that, poor quality fish meat as a feed stuff to raise fish or shrimps in aquaculture. And this is a big problem because the aquaculture does not contribute to the reduction of the overfishing in open water. So now the industry is trying to find plant-based feed to the fish and shrimp and other in aquaculture, and that's a big problem, and the industry is trying to solve.
Thank you very much. I hope those excuse me, those last comments also talk a little bit to Thomas Timberg's question about pond fisheries versus seed. I'd like to just move us along now to a question from Bart at McGill. He'd be interested in hearing, I guess it could be from any of you, but he says Takashi specifically, or any other panelists, sorry, on the potential impact over the next few decades of the growing global consumption of plant-based foods like Beyond Meat, the development of cultured lab-grown meat, and what this means in terms of agriculture and development in Asia. Anybody?
I don't know, in Canada, US, maybe the Impossible Meat burger is available, but it's not so much available in Asia yet. It has not come here in a large way. So we intentionally avoided discussing because we didn't know what to talk about it. I mean, but I can say as a Japanese, we had fake tofu meat for a long time. But I don't usually consume it. I don't know many people who consume it. So I haven't tasted Impossible Meat. So unless they really taste like meat, I think it's expensive, right? So I don't know why the Asian consumers, well, of course there are some people who are very concerned about that, but so well, it's too early for us to discuss it in Asia.
Okay. I think what I'll do is we'll take one last question, and that's around this issue of crop insurance. What would governments do to promote crop insurance schemes, given the fact that the government may not be able to cover the loss and the private sector may not be interested in providing schemes as they may not be profitable? So how is that going to be dealt with? Yeah,
it's as this person who questioned said, it is difficult to scale up of the crop insurance because the potential loss is too large for insurance companies to cover. And so the insurance company or the insurers of the insurance companies to cover because agriculture weather events can affect a large number of farmers. Having said that, it is expanding area. The many governments, many countries, the crop insurance programs are expanding, and then governments alone cannot or should not do this. This is an area where the private-public engagement should happen. So, but one thing we focused on in this report is that the technology can help, and technology is helping, especially the, as we said, advanced spatial information systems is make it easier for insurance programs to identify area which were affected by the weather events. So, and then the process of the digitization also helps. So, it's difficult to cover everyone, but it may be able to cover some farmers.
Okay, thank you. So we're going to close up. There are lots of very interesting questions out there from our panelists. We don't have time to address them all. One here from Carol Chan is, how do we get youth involved in agriculture? That's an important question given the context of the aging population and so forth. We have several around how do we actually localize the consumption of market and consumption of produce from a particular region instead of buying apples from England and pears from California and so on. What about the ones that are produced locally? And that speaks to our global food system and the way in which that works. So I'm going to leave it at that. I would like to invite the panelists just for any last comments or thoughts that you might have before I hand over to Laura and Prateep.
May I just say one thing? You mentioned about use, how to bring use. Technology, I don't think they are interested in becoming farmers, but I see many youth working as rural entrepreneurs, providing machine service to farmers using technology, using mobile phones and calling farmers, do you need, my tractor service and so on. So using technology and then helping farmers, this as business, that's maybe area where we can bring use in the farming. Forget about asking them to become a smallholder farmers. I don't think they're interested.
Okay, thank you.
Just want to quickly, sorry, Bruce, just want to quickly add that my research found that youth has been a leading force in promoting sustainability transition of agriculture. So that they are the leaders, they are the champions for developing organic and ecological agriculture projects, and also in organizing farmers cooperatives, and also starting all kinds of alternative food networks. So I think it's a promising trend in some parts of the Asian countries.
Yeah. Okay. So Takashi, I noticed you sort of stopped at one point and shook your head a little, because the question on fisheries and small-scale fishes and so on was obviously vexing. But Sissa, who asked that question in particular, is actually studying this very topic, and is part of the V2V partnership, vulnerability to viability, which focuses on small-scale fishes around the world, or particularly the global south. And so I'm going to hand over now to one of the leaders of that project, Prateep Nayak, and to Lauren, who is hosting this, and let them close up for us. So thank you very much.
All right, I'll start and then I'll kick things over to Prateep for his final words. I just wanted to say thank you all so much for participating in today's webinar on behalf of the Asian Development Bank North American Representative Office. We at the North American Representative Office focus on engagement with stakeholders in the United States and Canada. And we encourage you to reach out to us. You can find our information at www.adb.org/NARO, N-A-R-O, and we look forward to engaging further. With that, I will pass things over to Prateep for our final words.
Thank you very much. This has been a wonderful, experience. I would like to say thanks on behalf of the Faculty of Environment and all the co-hosts of this program, including ADB and V2V Global Partnership, for this wonderful session and the opportunity to engage in discussion and bringing in many people from around the world itself. One thing that this discussions and this session has been able to kind of emphasize on is the integrated nature of things. So the transformations in agriculture really depends on the transformations in other related sectors. So food and environment and other kinds of activities that contribute to each other, and that is reflected in how the 17 goals can only be achieved if they are looked at and worked upon in an integrated way. So my sincere thanks once again, and looking forward to another round of discussions in future with all of you. Thank you very much.